and Paul asked to speak about much less known piyut for Yom Kippur. Thank you. I will sit here to turn the pages upon request. Sasha Maklit?
Yep.
Okay, stage is yours.
Thank you very much for coming along. So I propose to talk about a lesser known piyut that we sing, or that was sung in the German tradition, in particular in German tradition, which in recent generations has faded out. But nonetheless, I consider this to be one of the most beautiful pieces of the Yom Kippur liturgy. And I propose to explain what is the significance of this passage, its literary background. It's a very old piyut. If we have time, which I hope we will, to hear some of the musical interpretations which were given to this passage in the German tradition, the Dutch tradition, Amsterdam, and whether in those synagogues which still do recite this poetry in modern Israel in particular, how they sing it. So the title of this lecture is Angelic Praise versus Human Praise, a Yom Kippur piyut and its literary and musical setting. Now, we can go to the next slide. For those, I've printed out a German translation of this piece, which in Old English, it's by the printer. If anyone would like to look at the German translation, because the English translation is archaic, might be difficult to understand. Asher ometz tehilatecha. Now, what is very interesting is that in the Ashkenazi Nusach, this particular passage and the message which it carries is said 3 times in the course of the Yom Kippur liturgy. In Shacharit, at Musaf, and at Mincha, in the morning service, the additional service, and the afternoon service. And its position in the liturgy is known as a kedushta, that is a poem which was composed to be recited just before the kedusha, which I'm sure all of you know is the highlight, is the summit of the liturgical cycle, sometimes called the sanctification, and its significance is such that even in church music, this is one of the fundamental elements which was adopted by the Catholic Church and introduced also into Christian liturgy, the sanctification. And normally, this exists on Shabbat, festivals, and the high holidays. Normally, for example, for Shabbat, there's a whole lead up to the Kiddushta, and this particular poem is in the genre of what's called Rahit. This is a literary technical term. There is a lead up to this, and in all, for Shabbat, there are 9 parts to this, to these liturgical insertions, which are known by the name, go under the name of Kerova. No one has explained exactly what this means, Kerova. The common understanding of it is that the hitkarev is when the cantor draws near to the reader's desk and he starts the repetition of the Amidah. These are all insertions in the Amidah, which has been said silently. And now he's about to draw near to the reader's desk and start the repetition of the Amidah in a loud voice. Other people have explained that it is an abbreviation. Kuf Resh Bet He Kol Rina V'Yeshua L'Tzadikim. But both the first and second explanation are just tentative. I'm not sure that we know exactly what was the original meaning of the Kurva. When you get on a plane, they show you a short excerpt of the security positions. And El Al, in order to keep your attention, they say, well, this is a card. Remember the number of the card, remember the value of the card, because we're going to tell you at the end of the clip what's it all about. So, there is a kedusha. Why we don't say this in the Ma'ariv is quite simply because there is no kedusha in Ma'ariv. So Ma'ariv is out. Shachrit, Musaf, Mincha, I said, but we do have kedusha in Ne'ilah, the concluding service of Yom Kippur. So the question is, there is no equivalent to this Rahit, to this Krova in Ne'ilah. So the question I'm going to put to you, and which I hope we'll be able to answer at the end of this lecture, is why isn't there an equivalent to this poem? After I explain what its significance is, why isn't there an equivalent in Ne'ilah? Okay, so what I'd like to say is that, just in a sentence, as the title of my lecture suggests, this poem is talking about the structure of the poem, and then, if we have time, how it is sung in the old German tradition. So the structure of the poem is in two parts. Might as well read it. Asher eimatecha be'erele omen, be'abirei omets, bivlule kerach. I'm sorry, that's Musaf. Yeah, Musaf. Shachrit is, you have it before you. Here it is. Asher omets tehilatecha be'ele shachak b'birkei noga bin gdudei gova b'damama daka, and then the refrain u'kedushatcha b'fihem. So you have the translation in English, otherwise you have it in German. I'll just translate very rapidly. They reverence him who is tremendous above them. Uvochein lenora alehem. This is the introductive verse. Asher ometz tehilatecha, the might of whose praise, be'ele shachak, is with the angelic hosts, lightnings that flash thy will, with troops of lofty stature. All this is a reference to the heavenly beings, the angels. In voice the small and still, thy holiness, O Lord, is in their mouth. Befihem, their mouth, refers to the angels. So the first passage refers to the angelic praise of God, because we're about to enter the Kedusha, in which we have two sentences, two verses which come from Yechezkel HaNavi, which says Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvaot, Meloch Ha'aretz Kevodo. And this is a phrase which Yechezkel HaNavi heard in his celestial trance from the angels. This is what the angels are saying, and then later, Baruch Kavod, Shem Kavod, that this is also something that angels say. But the second passage says, V'ratzita shevach, but you preferred the praise, you accepted the praise, mehome baregesh, of those throngs whose voices surge, the orche sheva, that turn to thee, and they're crying, zo'ake tehina, uttering supplication, hoche hanina, who are waiting for your grace, vehi kevodecha, and that is your honor, that is your real praise. So on the one hand, the first passage expresses how the praises of God are uttered by the angels, and which are fiery creatures, immaterial creatures of lofty spiritual stature, but but ratzita tehilatecha, but God is not looking for the praises of the angel. He lends his ear to the utterances of mankind. Who are mankind? They are imperfect creatures. They are frail.
Already a small question. Ratzita in a liturgical meaning could be also you accept.
Exactly.
Not you want.
Let's say tefilatenu.
Not like he wants to have the praise, but he is willing to accept the shevach or shevach meutei.
It has both meanings, because as we'll shortly see in Musaf, you have the same structure, but there it says ve'avita, which is an old archaic Hebrew term, which means accept. You preferred. It's saying that despite the imperfections of we humans, despite the fact that we have sinned, when we praise God, our praise somehow is higher than that of the angels. As the Rebbe of Kotsk once said, and it's a beautiful expression he explained, Anshe Kodesh Tiyuli, that you should be, we translated this, translate this as, you should be holy men unto me. But he said in Yiddish, and of course it's understandable in German, seid menschliche heilig, that you should be holy as human beings, that God has enough angels up on high. What he's looking for is the holiness of mankind. Beautiful expression. Mm-hmm. So, we can go to the next slide. So we've seen the structure, we might come back to this. This is on Musaf. We have the same idea, the Kedushta, before the congregation says collectively the Kedusha, but this time a different formulation. Asher ematcha be'eridei omen, although your dread, the fear of God, is amongst the angels who are abirei omets, who are courageous, victorious beings, blule kerach, who are mixed of immaterial elements, bibdude kedach, penetrating materials, umoracha alihem, and indeed the angels bear the fear of God. Ve'avita tehila, but you preferred to accept miglume gush, men who are mankind who is made of earth and who are midlule fo'al, dale ma'as, who have low actions, physical actions. You vehi tehilatecha. Conclude, the second part concludes, vehi tehilatecha. And that is indeed your praise, coming from the mouth of mankind. And we go on to Mincha, the third
Next page. Next page.
Where we have again, before the Kedusha, in the series of Krovot, we have this V'hashakta asher yiratcha ba'ometz malachim, the same idea, that your fear. But I'm going to point out at this moment that the authors are different. I'll give you some information about the different composers of these poems. Asher yiratcha ba'ometz malachim, that the fear of God is amongst the angels, etc., etc. V'hilulach b'fihem, and your praise is in their mouth, as it were, the mouth of the angels. V'hashakta, here is hashakta, lehithalel, but you desired to be praised. Mehevel hashuvim from the heaven, from the breath of mankind. That's what it means. Afar shavim, who are to return to the dust. Zidonot mehashavim, and who commit iniquity, sins. Hotim v'shavim, they do sin and
Repeat
do
them.
teshuvah and return. Vehi gedulatcha, and it is the actions of men, the praise of men, which is your real praise. So this is the basic idea.
Before this was composed or written,
Yeah.
what was in its place originally? If something, or was this just an additional thing that was added, but there was nothing before it?
Okay,
if
before
was
that
the
you just
case,
had the bare
why?
structure, of the Amidah
Yeah.
and its repetition. Now, when you say before, let's start off by saying
you've got 6
this
or 9
poem,
centuries.
these poems are over 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
That means, just look at this idea that countless generations of Jewish worshippers over the ages have been saying these prayers. That in itself is something that is mind-boggling. In addition to that, let me say something about the authors. So they compose these poems to embellish the liturgy. Also, we will see at the end that these poems bear a philosophical concept, and that these poems were also introduced to enhance one's meditations, one's thought, deeply spiritual on this very special day, and precisely why should we be saying this on Yom Kippur and not on any other day of the year? The answer is that in the Jewish tradition, in Dvarim Rabbah, it says that the man resembles the most the angelic realm. He comes closer to being an angel on Yom Kippur because he's not eating, he's not drinking, and there's other forbidden things which bring us to a near spiritual experience, even though we are physical beings. One of the pointers to this is that this phrase, Baruch Shem Kavodo, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, which we say every day, sometimes twice in the morning, evening, sometimes even 3 times, sometimes even 4 times a day. Whereas we say Shema Yisrael, this is the profession of the unity of God. We say this out loud, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. We say this out loud, collectively, the Chazan and the congregation together. But the following verse, which is introduced in the reading of the Shema, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, is said b'lachash, in an undertone. It's not to be said out aloud, because the Midrash says that this, by the way, is not a biblical verse. It doesn't occur in the Bible. Many people think this is from the Bible. It's not. It's a non-biblical verse, and the tradition says that Moshe heard this from the angels when he ascended to heaven. He heard the angels saying this, and therefore, as long as we are not in an angelical status, angelical state, we are not allowed to say this, except for Yom Kippur, when we say this out loud every time the Shema is recited, because we are like angels that day. And indeed, the Yom Kippur service concludes with Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, which is repeated 7 times out loud. That's the concluding moment of the Yom Kippur service. So, on the day that we are resembling angels, it is apposite. This is a most appropriate prayer to be saying, that We are coming near to the angels, the state of angels, and the question is, who is to be preferred? Who is greater, angels or mankind? This is the philosophical question behind this poem. Now, the first poem, Asher Ometz Tehilatecha, was composed by Meshulam ben Kalonimos, who came from the famous Kalonimos family, originating in Lucca in Italy, and at some point they emigrated to Germany. So this is he lived in the 11th century. So we're talking about a poem which is over 1,000 years old, which was probably composed in Germany, in Mainz, and its author, Meshulam ben Kalonimus, is also known to us from two other instances connected with Yom Kippur. He is the author of the Avodah in the Ashkenazi rite, ritus, which is repeated, which is pronounced in the Musaf service and relates the service of
You mean
the
Seder
Kohanim.
Avodah?
Avodah, Seder Avodah. Here the meaning Seder Avodah means the sacerdotal, the priestly service in the temple. So we have two main, in Ashkenazi Rayon, we have two main versions of this. Amitz Koach, which was written by Meshulam ben Kalonimus, the same author, and the Hasidim say Ata Kun Anta, which is, I think, is from Yanai, who's an even older poet. Now, this is, I told you before that in every Shabbat there are 9 kerovot which lead up to, which are recited out throughout the repetition of the Amidah. This is the 12th part of 25 poems that are recited during the repetition of the Amidah, which shows that most of them are written by Meshulam ben Kalonimus. The whole of all these poems that we recite during the repetition of the Amidah, and most of them are written by the same author, Meshulam ben Kalonimus. Recently, after Kristallnacht and part destruction of the Jewish cemetery in Mainz, many years afterwards, the tombstone of Meshulam ben Kalonimus was found. It's a tombstone, it's over 1,000 years old, and it is now in the Historical Museum of Mainz. Okay, so the second poem, that which is recited in Musaf, Asher Imatecha Be'erele Omen, there's a discussion whether this poem is by Yanai or by Eliezer Kalia, both of whom were Palestinian poets, Eretz Israeli poets, and their time, because they do not mention the invasion of Palestine by the Arabs in the 7th century, it is believed that Kalia lived in the 6th century, at least the 6th century. So we're talking about 1,500 years. This poem has 1,500 years. We won't go into the details, but it's the same structure. Double stanza, the first of which it refers to the angels, the second refers to humankind. Let's go a little further into the internal structure. These poets, synagogue poets known as Paitanim, who wrote piyutim, liturgical poetry. This was before the time of rhyme was introduced into Hebrew poetry. That came much later in Spain, but we'll be seeing an example of a rhymed poem. What was then the difference between prose and poetry? The difference was that there is a rhyme in the refrain, because, for example, in the English tradition, British tradition, the Chazan recites normally quite rapidly. He doesn't sing, etc., etc. And then the congregation replies, Umarache alehem vehitilatecha, Umarache alehem vehitilatecha. So that refrain, which is a recurring refrain, forms the poetic geist of the piyut. In addition to which, these poems are either alphabetical, as you see if we go back to the first poem, Asher Ometz Tehilatecha, that's Aleph, Be'ere Shahag Bet, Bebirkei Noga. The second consonant of each of these words is in alphabetical order. Biggedude Gimel Gova, Bigdemume Aleph Bet Gimel Dalet, Vratzita Sheva, Mehome Beregesh He, Ve'orche Sheva, and goes on and on. Alphabetical order. Sometimes it's Aleph Bet Gimel Dalet until the end of the alphabet. Sometimes it's Aleph Aleph Bet Bet Gimel Gimel, and not here but in other liturgical poems. The characteristic which signifies that it's poetry, not prose, is that the author signs his name in the poem. For example, Kalir will be Eliezer. There will be a poem that starts with Aleph and then Lamed, or the second letter is an Aleph and then the second letter is a Lamed.
A very known example is the Chaludim.
The Chadodi, but this is
Shlomo
later.
Halevi.
This is like 16th century.
Yeah.
What is about the reverse alphabetic?
Oh yeah, it can be very good. It can be Aleph Bet Gimel. This is called Aleph Bet Gimel, or it can be Tashrik. Taf Shin Resh Kuf goes backwards. And okay, some people say that
All right, just
the explanation is
we have 15 more minutes, so if you want to go to the music,
okay.
you
The
might
music
like
is
to.
very brief.
Okay.
But what I wanted to show you, the last slide, we go to
The last slide.
This is no, sorry. This one here.
Okay.
This is a poem by a Sephardi author, Yosef ben Abitur, who was born in Spain near Badajoz in Merida, and he composed this poem, Rome Eiretz, with an ayin. Very important to pronounce the ayin. Is built. It comes at the same place. It's just before the kedusha, so it's a kedushta. But with the important difference that this is rhyming poetry, which was the Spanish tradition. But what is amazing is that it's on the same thing. That when he talks about Eretz, he refers to the angels because they are ma'aritzim, ma'aritzecha v'nagdishecha. They are those who praise God. And when he talks about Eretz, the terrestrial, he's talking about mankind.
Yeah.
So this is a poem in the same place and the same concept, angels and men, but it's by a Sephardi author, which is amazing. And the question which was asked as early as the 19th century by Landshut in his Avodat Yisrael, was the first study of Jewish poets, he gives an answer to the question, but how come a Sephardi poet is using the same thing as the Paitanic tradition? You get the question?
Yeah.
And he answers that there's no problem, that the Kaliric poetry, the old Palestinian Paitanic tradition, was known in Spain, known and read in Spain. How do we know this? You sang Avraham ibn Ezra.
Yeah.
So, do you have the answer to the question?
Could
it be that the Sfaradim knew what was to become the Ashkenazic poetry?
What I know, I tell you another direction. We learned halacha a week ago, and the Rashba was living in Barcelona, and the Rosh was living in Germany.
He was
in the
originally
12th
from
century
Germany,
maybe.
yeah.
And we saw that Rashba and Rosh have same opinion about this subject. And then I realized that the Rosh moved from
No, he
Germany
came from Germany.
to Barcelona. So it
Okay.
means that there was movement, there
No,
was
the
connection.
answer is very clear. In his commentary on Kohelet, in the opening verses, Abraham ibn Ezra criticizes Kalia for you having invented new Hebrew words, some of whom are still used in modern Hebrew. Some of the terms that we have in modern Hebrew are coming from the Paitanic tradition. An example is masach. Masach, a screen, is not a Hebrew word. It's not a biblical word, not in that sense, but it's coming from the Paitanic tradition. There are a whole list of examples. And Abraham ibn Ezra goes to town on Kalia that his Hebrew is not biblical Hebrew and it should not be used for prayers to God. So that is a proof that in Sepharad they were aware of the Paitanic tradition, and so we can explain how come Yosef ibn Abitur was inspired by the Paitanic tradition of comparing angels to men, and how it got into the Sephardi tradition. Then there's a text, Saadia Gaon, which explains what was going on at that time in the Gaonic period. Yosef ibn Abitur lived in the 11th century, which was the high days of the Gaonic period. I thought it's very small, but it's very interesting. It's this one, the Saadia Gaon.
This one?
Saadia Gaon, this is
אחד
from
אחורה,
Henry Malta's book about
לא,
Saadia
שתיים
Gaon
קדימה,
and
שתיים
his
קדימה.
works. And this
זהו.
page 214, you can look up on it's available on the internet. Malta, M-A-L-T-R, Saadia Gaon. On this page 214, he gives a wonderful development about the idea of how in the Middle Ages there was a debate about the superiority of men over angels. And Saadia was a partisan of this idea that insofar as they act in holiness, men are superior to angels. Not everyone was agreed about this, and in Abraham ibn Ezra again, his commentary this time on Exodus, Shemot, chapter 20, verse 23, he enters a great diatribe against Saadia. You know, how could he have conceived of the fact that man is superior to the angels? And he, of course, takes the other posture that the angels are always, as immaterial and spiritual beings, they will always be superior to man. So that's about the philosophical content, and still have time perhaps to say something about how this has come down in the musical tradition. Unfortunately, in modern day Israel, many of the piyutim are left out in the service. Someone once explained to me, how come the Ashkenazim always recite the poetry in Germany, whereas in Israel, for whom Hebrew is the natural language, they don't recite them, and they put them at the end of the Machzor. The answer that was given to me by someone who was serious, but it's quite funny, is that in German they would read the piyutim and they would not understand them. But they understood that they could not understand them. They understood why they don't understand them. In Israel, they read the piyutim and they don't understand them, but they don't understand why they don't understand them. So they put them.
It's true. You cannot understand Hakalil. You need to.
You have to have.
You know, he's
it's not given
criticized
to a layman.
in his lifetime, I think, already. That there was already like a critique that you cannot understand.
Yeah,
You
they
have
are
to
medieval
You have
commentaries.
five smichot to go
No,
to faith.
knowledgeable people could understand that, but you have to have the culture in order to do so. So in the Middle Ages, people wrote commentaries, even in the Machzorim, manuscript Machzorim, we have commentaries on Karya. So we're going to hear now, you have, just an inch why I put this book by Uri Aharon, the tune that we are going to listen to, which is, by the way, the Chazan in Heidelberg, the rabbi in Heidelberg, Janusz Paradchik, is the old German, the old Frankfurt
I'm trying
tradition.
to do something.
Yeah,
I hope this is not like everything. I want to try and show it. Yeah,
If I can,
Oh, I don't know.
Amnon is not here.
I don't think
Amnon.
we'll be able to.
אני פה.
תביא.
Do you have?
ננסה.
Hold on, let's see.
רק צריך לחבר את זה כן.
תן לי לראות איך זה, אתה מתחבר את הטלפון שלך.
רגע, אני צריך למצוא את זה.
יש לו חור שם למטה שאנחנו בדיוק.
Now, what is interesting while I'm looking for this is that this book by Aharon, Uri Aharon, called Hama'alot Shir, explains that in the German tradition, Shir Hama'alot, which is said before Birkat Hamazon, this is the one here. How do we, Amnon, you showed me before, if I plug this in.
Yeah, it works. Benny?
Follow in the text. This is the angel. Angel, now man. Now, in the German tradition, and Frankfurt tradition at least, for every festival, for every Shabbat, which had a special theme, you would sing the Shir HaMa'alot to the tune of Chanukah, tune of Purim, Elul, and this is Shir HaMa'alot, which is sung from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, not on Yom Kippur because there's no Birkat Hamazon, but it's to the tune of Asher Ometz Koratecha. Okay, that's one. And then I have another one from the Amsterdam, from the Alsace tradition. Amsterdam, it's it, 17, it should be. No. This is Amsterdam. For mankind's been more solemn.
ידעו, בפוגעי חובות, ולגיוני אליו,
Okay, okay. Now, what about modern day Israel? We said that these poems are too heavy for the chazan or the choir, and that in most synagogues they are not recited in Israel, unfortunately. There is an institution called Yeshivat Har Etzion, which has a very beautiful musical tradition. They sing everything in the service. In Yom Kippur lasts all day. There's no pause. You can look up on YouTube Asher Ometz Gedulatecha, how this is sung in the Yeshiva Har Etzion. They sing it today according to a melody by Kalabach, which is very moving.
Oh my
If
God.
you look it up, it's very beautiful, nonetheless. However, the man who reintroduced the singing of this piyut was someone called Yehuda Amital, who was born in Romania. He was able to leave just before war broke out, and he came to Palestine, and he enhanced the service of the Bakurei Yeshiva, the students of the Yeshiva, and he chose as a tune an old Yiddish folk song, which is as follows. Die Mama hat geheißen, Nisselach von Bäumen abreißen, Nisselach von Bäumen abreißen. Oi weh, heuch sennen die Zweigelach, oi wie niedrig sennen die Kinderlach. So, did everyone understand Yiddish?
Yeah.
That the mama told the children to pick some nuts, but the tree was too high and they couldn't
Children
reach the
are too
nuts.
small.
The kids were too small, yeah.
So he chose, as I have a recording of it, but I think
One
we
last sentence maybe, because
Ah.
time's up.
okay, we'll have to miss that up. It's not available on YouTube, but the message was the same opposition between mortals and angels. But we want to reach up to the angels, and we might be with our shortcomings and our imperfections, we might not be able to reach up. Thank you very much.